Next, we will hear from Manuel Sanches of Eno, excerpted from a recent panel discussion on effective M&A integration. For the past dozen years, Manuel has led the development and refinement of a highly effective full lifecycle M&A tool, one that specifically addresses the challenges inherent in M&A and applies automation where it has the most impact. Along the way, and with the guidance and input of numerous M&A corporate practitioners and customers, Manuel has compiled a list of attributes, a framework of what your M&A tool needs to do for you to help you maximize the value of your M&A activity. Manuel, tell us what you've learned.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Stacy and Gerald, for your excellent portions of the presentation. Stacy and Gerald spoke about program management and approaches and strategies for post-merger integration. And what I'd like to do is first boil down that very large and diverse set of topics into one bite-sized topic that we can then use as our entry into the topic of tools. And what I'd like to do is convert all that vocabulary into just one word, which is action. Everything that you're managing via program management, all of your approaches and strategies and communications are all actions that need to be taken by yourselves, by your team members, by your PMO team. And these actions need to be orchestrated and tracked and measured and so forth. And that's where your tool can help you most, of course. What we do with those actions are capture them in our plans. We organize them, for example, by team and sub-team. We assign these actions to individual owners. We communicate them. We execute them. We measure the results of these actions. We report on the results. And we try and institutionalize a lot of these actions and repeat them with better and better success with experience. So what are the standard tools that we use to help us with all that? Well, obviously we use email and shared drives and tools like SharePoint, spreadsheets, project management software, other types of documents. And of course, we wouldn't be having this presentation today if there weren't issues and limitations with all of these. So, why are these tools insufficient? Why do they fail us at some level in post-merger integration? Of course, all of them have a role, but when we rely on them, as most of us here today have experienced if we've been involved in post-merger integration, there's a certain amount of information overload when you have all this information, all these different locations. It's difficult to see exactly what's going on at any given time. And I don't want to get into all the problems in detail. I think we're all familiar with them. What I'm going to talk about today more are kind of why we have those problems and what those reasons tell us about what a proper tool should look like, and in turn what the benefits of a dedicated mission-specific tool can do for us. So the reason these traditional tools aren't sufficient, obviously we need to use them, but they're not sufficient in themselves, partly because they're not designed to specifically to help us with PMI. They're great at their respective individual missions, but together they really don't constitute a solution for our mission. They're really individual productivity tools as opposed to a group-wide enabler, which is really what we need. When we're doing PMI, we're acting as a group, in fact a very large group. These tools are really not targeted at that either. All of these tools, email and project plans and spreadsheets and so forth, present a lot of data. They contain a lot of data, but that data is not interconnected. So the fact that that data is not connected creates all manner of the issues that we experience. And the reason for that in turn is really that these different media, even email if you think about it, email, spreadsheets, shared drives, what they're about are files or documents. Every email is a file, every spreadsheet is a file, even your project management plans, they're a bit more interactive than an email, say, but they're just files. And files are designed to capture information and depict information, including action, but they can't really drive action the way a system designed to manage and help execute action really can. So to summarize, all of these traditional tools fail us because they are individual file and document oriented individual productivity tools with isolated islands of disconnected data. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so what should a proper post-merger integration tool look like? What are the fundamental requirements of a tool? What should they be that will not have these same sorts of issues? Well, let's start with the obvious. It should be designed for supporting post-merger integration. It really should be PMI mission specific. Secondly, it should not be file-based. It should be database driven. Just as in the other areas of your company like supply chain and finance and HR and so forth, all of these areas are typically supported by a database, an enterprise database-based infrastructure. All of the data within that database naturally should be interconnected. So changes that happen in one area of the system ripple through to other areas of the system without you having to manually make the connections yourselves. And finally, via that interconnectedness of the data and via automation and alerts and so on and so forth, the system should directly drive action as opposed to simply depicting action via a file or a PowerPoint or a flowchart or something. Let's go to the next slide. What are some of those types of data and information that you want to have built into your mission-specific, PMI-specific tool? Well, here are some of the moving parts. So obviously, you could get into finer and finer levels of detail here, but at a first analysis, you need at least the following. You need to organize your data in terms of teams and sub-teams and team members, which means your system has to have a facility for implementing and managing that team structure and team membership. You need to be able to manage the entire team structure as well as all of the users. It needs to support communications that are specific to the post-merger activities as opposed to your generic communications infrastructure. It needs to support your PMI plans and activities. It needs to allow you to collect both the plan data, but also the other types of data that you collect throughout your post-merger efforts. For example, your synergy data, your baseline data, and so on and so forth. Whatever the information is that's relevant to your particular type of transaction, you need to be able to collect that data in your PMI tool and not in some separate file. Your PMI tool needs to have built-in reporting and analysis of all that data that is collected in your tool. Again, it should not be a separate file or a separate system for doing that. You may offload data to do very specialized manipulations of the data, but your fundamental tracking of progress, plan versus actual, and so on and so forth needs to be right there in your PMI tool. Because so many people interact with the system, because so many people are involved in PMI and therefore should be interacting with the system, you need a way to manage access control. And that access control, once again, should reflect the specific requirements of PMI. Once you see some examples in real tools, this might make more sense, but for now, I would simply summarize the access control issue by pointing out that post-merger integration obviously involves a lot of sensitive information, and the requirements of controlling who can see and edit and pass on that information follow certain patterns that are specific to PMI, and you shouldn't have to be reinventing that wheel. Your PMI tool needs to have baked-in access control. And finally, all of the above needs to be administered, and that should be facilitated by simple tools for doing that, so that also needs to be part of the tool. So, sort of the next slide. Now, if your tool has your team member management and your team structure and communications and all of your action planning and data collection and so forth, the benefits that you gain are, or at least some of them are, as follows. First of all, you can institutionalize that tribal knowledge that Stacy referred to in your system. As you deploy the system for subsequent transactions, you can re-leverage and extend that tribal knowledge without ever having to reinvent it. So managing and improving that tribal knowledge is a fundamental benefit of this type of a system. You get built-in process discipline. Some of the discipline that Gerald was talking about is a lot easier to maintain, and in particular to maintain at a similar level across many teams and individuals if it's reflected in the design of your PMI system. Thirdly, you get real-time visibility of what's going on with your integration, who's doing what the results are, where you are in your plans, and so on and so forth. And that in turn gives you a fantastic level of accountability that is otherwise pretty difficult to, if not impossible to achieve. And because you have real-time visibility and all of your PMI data live in a single system, all interconnected, that gives you the next benefit, which is the near instantaneous reaction speed. As your plans track or perhaps don't quite track where they should be, you're able to quickly identify not only how far off they are from plan, but why and who's responsible, so that you can immediately get things back on track or change your strategy as needed. The next to the last benefit on the list is execution efficiencies. You save immense amounts of time for your team members, your managers, the program office, that you are no longer wasting in chasing after data and so on and so forth that we'll be speaking about in a moment. And that freed up time makes you much more efficient in your integration efforts as a whole. And that in turn leads to our final benefit on this slide, a faster and more complete capture of the intended value of that particular transaction. Let's go to the next slide. Everything is a trade-off though, right? So we gain many advantages by using a mission-specific, database-driven, modern tool for supporting your PMI, but we give up a few things, but these are things you'll probably be happy to give up. The first is you give up the mystery of not knowing exactly where you are between reporting cycles. If you generate your reports weekly or biweekly or monthly or quarterly, your reports give you a snapshot as of a few days, perhaps, prior to the reports being issued. And once that report's issued, there's a certain time during which you have no real knowledge about what's going on, just the more sort of grapevine knowledge. If you're on a steering committee, for example, you need to wait for the next report, which might be some way off. So in between, you have what I call a blackout period. So you give up blackout periods as well. You give up the data chase of having to hunt down spreadsheets from the different teams, updates, executive summaries, compiling all that data, finding the stragglers, chasing after those, updating your, revising your final report, and so on and so forth. And finally, you give up reinventing the wheel, because your tool institutionalizes that tribal knowledge, as we spoke about, allows you to clone your effective practices and refine them with each transaction. But in return, as we mentioned earlier, we gain all of these other benefits. And this is really what a tool is all about. Whatever type of tool you use should be giving you these benefits. And if you're not getting this with email and shared drives and project management software and so forth, then you should really consider using a modern PMI tool such as we have today.